Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, there was a sighting of actual baseball players at actual Dodger Stadium. That was exciting. We're going to talk a little bit about Gavin Lux, Trayce Thompson, and Jason Heyward showing up at Dodger Stadium for a workout, along with Dino Ebel and some others. We're going to talk about Heyward's chances of making the Dodgers, and we're going to talk a little bit about the youngest position player in Major League history who happened to be a Dodger. That's what's on tap, so let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. My normal co-host is Vince Samperio, but it's just me today. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room, so we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. And that's what we're going to do today. There's no major news in Dodgers land, but there was on Dodgers social media, there was a couple posts about some workouts at Dodger Stadium. And these posts were notable for a couple reasons. One interesting thing was there was a little bit of an uproar about Gavin Lux, who is looking, as the kids say, swole. Although he looks very good. I assume he looks more ripped, bigger than he did last year. It's not ridiculous. I think, he's got a tight t-shirt with tight sleeves, and he's got the bicep, tricep tattoo that kind of, I don't know, something about it kind of makes him look like The Rock a little bit, and The Rock is definitely a well-built young man. But overall, yeah, Lux looks like he's in very good shape. And ultimately, the part I'm most interested in is his neck, because Gavin Lux last year was having a very, very good season, an outstanding season, until his neck injury slowed him down. Through August 22nd, which happens to be my wedding anniversary, but that's irrelevant to this point, he was batting .297 with a .373 on base percentage and a .439 slugging percentage. So even though he wasn't hitting many home runs, he had an .812 OPS, which is actually better than what Trey Turner ended up with. Gavin Lux was having a very, very good season. But then the reason I chose August 22nd is because he then missed 4 games because of a neck issue. And from August 28th, when he came back to the end of the season, he missed more time because of the neck thing, and he batted .162 with a .388 OPS. So his overall season numbers don't look great, but if you look at it up until the neck injury, it was an outstanding season. Just everything we could have hoped for from Gavin Lux. And as we go into the 2023 season, with Lux possibly being the starting shortstop, if he's healthy, if he can hit the way he hit last year, even if he plays average defense at shortstop, I think he's going to have good range. We all have concerns about his arm. Does he have the arm strength to really play there? We'll talk a little bit later about another former Dodger shortstop who had questions about his arm too. But does he have the arm? Does he have the footwork and everything? Gavin Lux is an amazing athlete, just ridiculous athlete. And so obviously there's more to throwing a ball than athleticism. I think the footwork thing that some people are concerned about, I think he has the athleticism to figure out the footwork, and the arm strength. We'll just have to see what happens. But offensively, if Lux can hit like he did before the neck injury last year, we're all going to be really, really happy with what we see there. Other guys there at Dodger Stadium, you had Trayce Thompson, who interestingly has grown his hair out. And I always even when he was with the Dodgers in 2016 and 2017, he's basically always had a shaved head. And I always just assumed that was because he was balding. And Mookie Betts has a shaved head because he's balding. Uh, you know, uh, Albert Pujols started shaving his head when he was balding. I just assumed Trayce Thompson was balding, but no, he's got a full head of hair. And with the hair, the resemblance between him and his brother Clay, I think, stands out more. You can definitely see the family resemblance, and he's looking good. We saw a video of him swinging the bat. He was wearing kind of a baggy hoodie a little bit, and so you can't tell for sure, but he looks like he's in pretty good shape too. And the other one, well, there was Chris Taylor. Chris Taylor looks good. We know that he's been working hard this offseason. He's been working at Driveline. He's been working on his own. He is very committed to getting past last year's really, really bad season. And he also had a neck issue. And that's, you can't tell by looking at a guy how strong his neck is. But everything we can see about Taylor looks like he's in pretty good shape. The other one was Jason Heyward. And Heyward looks great. Like Jason Heyward, this isn't locked on MLB ball players' bodies, but mostly I'm talking about these guys' bodies in the context of how well they're going to play baseball in 2023. Jason Heyward, it's like if I looked like Jason Heyward, I wouldn't even own any shirts. That's what I'm getting at. He's got a long sleeve Dodgers t-shirt on, and you can still tell that he's just got muscles stacked on top of muscles. Just looks very good. And the reason that matters is because Jason Heyward's trying to bounce back, and being in peak physical condition will be a key part of that. He's putting in the work. We've heard all about, we've seen evidence now a couple times of the work he's putting in at Dodger Stadium. He is committed to being successful, and physically, he looks as good as he's ever looked. Just peak physical condition. And he's not young anymore, but he's not old either. He's 33 years old. That's older than Vince and younger than me, but a lot closer to Vince than to me. I mean, he's still young, and he's in very good shape. And so, excuse me, I'm actually my second segment today is going to be talking about Jason Heyward and his chances of making the big league roster. And that was kind of these pictures is what kind of got me thinking about Heyward, in addition to a question that I got from a listener who I think also saw these pictures and maybe was thinking about him too. But the one thing that's really striking about Heyward and everything we've seen this offseason is how happy he looks. And I don't know that he looked unhappy in Chicago, but Jason Heyward looks very happy to be a Dodger. Obviously, being back with Freddie Freeman will be exciting for him. And so I'm rooting for him to make the roster. And that's all I'm going to say in terms of spoilers for the second segment, because I am going to come back in just a minute and I'm going to talk about Jason Heyward's chances of being on the big league club with the Dodgers in 2023. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar is delicious. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, then you've got to try Built Bar. Or Built Puffs, which are like chocolate-covered marshmallows that are somehow healthy for you. I've talked about Built Bar a lot. If you've ever watched or listened to this show, you've heard me talk about Built Bar probably. It is my go-to snack when I need something that's delicious and healthy. My kids all love it. My wife loves it. They all go to that. My son is wrestling. It's wrestling season right now, and so he is constantly concerned about making sure to get his protein, get some good nutrients without breaking the bank on calories and carbs and all that, because he's making weight every week. And Built Bar is great for that. He loves grabbing a Built Bar and knowing that you can even have two. If you're really hungry, have two Built Bars. They are delicious. They're all covered in 100% real chocolate. And there's so many different ways you can get them now, because they are now available at Walmart and Sam's Club. So if you have a Walmart nearby, go to Walmart. If you have a Sam's Club membership, go to Sam's Club. You can buy them, and you can still, of course, always buy them online at built.com, and be sure to use our promo code LOCKEDON15 and you'll get 15% off. But wherever you get them, just get them. If you haven't tried Built Bar yet, you are already late to the party. Don't be even later. Try Built Bar now, because it is the greatest thing. You can thank me later. All right, I am back. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. When you're done here for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. And we talked about Jason Heyward last segment. I want to talk about him a little bit more. Jason Heyward, at the beginning of his career, was legitimately great, like on a path to superstardom. He was a good hitter, at times a very good hitter, and he was an outstanding defender in right field. It's hard to be valuable as a right fielder because right field is one of the easiest positions to play. It has one of the highest positional adjustments, or lowest, however you want to look at it, when you're calculating WAR. If you're a right fielder, you're already behind the game in terms of WAR. And yet Jason Heyward put up super valuable seasons as a right fielder. Through age 25, Jason Heyward had 29.8 WAR. It's a crazy high number. And to put it in context, that's the 34th highest WAR in baseball history through age 25. And at the top of the list, you got some ridiculous guys. Mike Trout and Ty Cobb and Mike Trout are number 1 and 2. Mickey Mantle's number 3. I mean, they're up in the 50s. So 29.8 doesn't compare to those guys. But let me read to you the guys around Jason Heyward. The 5 guys just above him, numbers 29 through 33 on this list, where Jason Heyward is number 34. 29, Stan Musial. 30, Barry Bonds. 31, Willie Mays. 32, Lou Gehrig. 33, Babe Ruth. You heard of some of those guys, right? Ted Williams is just in number 27. Ricky Henderson, Joe DiMaggio. Jason Heyward was within a stone's throw of being as good as those guys through age 25. And then just below him, you've got Hall of Famer Roberto Alomar, Hall of Famer Joe Medwick. And then you've got Jim Fregosi, who people forget. People remember he was traded for Nolan Ryan, and it was such a lopsided trade. The reason that trade happened was because at the time, Jim Fregosi was a no doubt future Hall of Famer. The problem is he was really bad the rest of his career. Dick Allen, who probably should be in the Hall of Fame and will be eventually. Travis Jackson, Bryce Harper, George Brett, Joe Kelly, not the former Dodger, but the older guy, Evan Longoria, Shoeless Joe Jackson. There's some really good guys below Jason Heyward on this list too. All that is just context to say, through his first 6 seasons, Jason Heyward was a legitimate superstar looking like a future Hall of Famer. And then he signed his contract with the Cubs, and the wheels just kind of came off. He has never hit as well again, other than the shortened 2020 season. He has never hit as well as he did basically every year with the Braves, and then 1 year with the Cardinals. And that's it's weird. He remained a very good defender. And these days, the last couple of years, he's been less outstanding defensively, been more of an average fielder. But last year was the first year he had a negative WAR. 2021 and 2022 both were not good seasons. He didn't hit well. His OPS plus combined between 2021 and 2022, OPS plus is, my computer decided to choose now to be slow to calculate this for me. Well, he had a 69 1 year and a 58 the other year. So it was somewhere between 58 and 69, both of which are really bad. Remember, league average is 100. So he's about 45%, 45% worse, 40% worse than league average on OPS plus the last 2 years. So the Dodgers obviously saw something in him. And some of that might have just been he's still a freakishly good athlete, and he used to be good. And so maybe we can fix him. We know that Freddie Freeman pushed for the Dodgers to sign Heyward, and he's excited. He thinks there's still more in the tank for Heyward. If there's a team that can find that, it will be the Dodgers. But one thing that really stands out to me when I look at this, I think all of us who followed baseball the last several years, we think of Jason Heyward as really just crapping the bed as soon as he signed with the Cubs. And while that's true, he was still a reasonably valuable player for a few years with the Cubs. Problem is, he just wasn't worth the 20 something million a year that they were paying him. So, relative to what the Cubs were paying him, yeah, he was terrible. But relative to real life, he was okay. He was worse than he had been. He wasn't worth what he was being paid, but he was still okay. And I've talked about this before. In 2021, when the Dodgers signed Albert Pujols, Albert Pujols was a little bit better with the Dodgers than he'd been with the Angels, but not a ton better. The difference is the Dodgers were only paying him $350,000 instead of the $30 million a year that the Angels have been paying him. And so the expectations were lower. They were able to put him in different positions, like not defensive positions. You don't put Albert Pujols in any defensive positions if you can help it, but in different situations, use him in different situations and not worry about, we're paying this guy, we have to start him. And that worked out beautifully for the Dodgers. Jason Heyward is in the exact same boat. The Cubs are paying him $22 million in 2023, minus whatever the Dodgers pay him, which will be the league minimum if he makes the team. So the Dodgers at the most are going to pay him $720,000 in 2023. For $720,000, they don't need Jason Heyward to be the future Hall of Famer that he was for the first 6 years of his career. They just need him to be solid, fill the role that they need. And so that's why I think there's a very, very good chance that he's going to make the Dodgers, because what they're looking for, excuse me, they don't necessarily need him to be a superstar. They don't really even need him to be a starter. He is a veteran. He's a leader. He's a proven leader on every team he's been on. Everybody loves him. Everybody listens when he speaks. He obviously, I've mentioned, he looks like he's having a ton of fun. He will bring that happiness to the dugout and that leadership that, they lost Justin Turner. There's a little bit of leadership void. They have other guys who can fill that void, but Jason Heyward is definitely one of those guys who can fill that void. And so I think there's a lot of value there. He can still play the outfield reasonably well, at least. I think he's never really played left field in his career. In fact, he's maybe never played left field at all. But I think he could be a solid left fielder and an occasional center fielder. And I think he could bring a lot of value there defensively. And if working with the Dodgers hitting team, if he can just become a league average hitter even, he would be very valuable to this Dodgers team with everything else he brings and with the tiny amount that they're paying him. The one downside is he's a minor league contract, so he's not on the 40-man roster. So in order for him to be on the active roster, he'd have to be put on the 40-man roster. The good news is, as soon as spring training starts, the Dodgers have 3 spots available on the 40-man roster because Walker Buehler and JP Fireeisen and whoever the third person is. I know there's a third pitcher that should be obvious to me. Oh, Blake Trinan. Those 3 guys will be eligible for the 60-man injured list, 60-day injured list. And when you're on the 60-day IL, you don't count towards the 40-man roster. And so there will be room. By the time the Dodgers have to make a decision at the end of spring training, there will be room for Jason Heyward on their 40-man roster. And that's really the only thing holding it back. Like when you look at the Dodgers' current 40-man roster, they don't have, I think there's plenty of room to make room for a guy like Jason Heyward. He's not going to be pushing off a prospect who, absolutely deserves to be on the roster right now. There's just, when you look at the 13 possible, there'll be 13 position players. Austin Barnes and Will Smith will be 2 of them. So that gets down to 11. We know Freddie Freeman, Gavin Lux, Max Muncy, Miguel Rojas, Miguel Vargas. That gets us down to 6 spots available. Mookie Betts, Chris Taylor, Trayce Thompson, JD Martinez. That gets us down to 2 spots available. And you've got, probably the most likely guys for that, James Outman and Jason Heyward. The odd guy out there is Yanni Hernandez. But I think Yanni Hernandez kind of became expendable when the Dodgers got Miguel Rojas. And Hernandez has options available, so it's not the end of the world to send him to the minors and he can be an option if somebody gets hurt. But I mean, if I look at, Michael Bush, I guess is the other guy there who maybe deserves a shot and maybe will earn a shot out of spring training, and that would put a damper on things there. Other than that, though, like I think there's a really good chance that Jason Heyward's going to be on the Dodgers this year, and I think that's cool. I really like Jason Heyward, and I think there's potential for him to be. I don't think he will ever be the superstar he was early in his career, but I think there's plenty of potential for him to be a solid ball player for the Dodgers, and that's what they need. So those are my Jason Heyward thoughts. I'm going to come back in a minute, and I'm going to talk to you about the youngest position player and second youngest overall player in Major League history. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please continue to keep it Locked On Dodgers. All right, I am back. I want to thank you again for making us your first listen every weekday morning. If you are watching on YouTube, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Love to hear your thoughts on Jason Heyward or Gavin Lux or Trayce Thompson or anything else that we've talked about. If you're listening on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you through social media or email or whatever. I'll give you all that contact info at the end, like always. I did forget to mention that part of the reason I was thinking about Jason Heyward is because our buddy Pat Dwyer at the real PJ Dwyer on Twitter, loyal listener, good dude. I've met him at Dodger Stadium a few times. Great guy. And he sent us a DM on our Locked On Dodgers Twitter account asking about Jason Heyward being featured so prominently on like Dodger social media and stuff, and what we think that means about his chances of making the 40-man roster. So that was part of what got me thinking about Heyward. So I just wanted to thank Pat for reaching out and remind you all to do that too, because it's awesome to hear your thoughts on what you'd like us to talk about on the show. So finally, I'm going to finish this episode off by talking about a guy. If you go to a website called oldest.org, they have a list of the 8 youngest MLB players ever. And the youngest ever, and I don't know, I assume this is pretty common. This is one I've known since I was a kid. Joe Nuxhall was the youngest player in MLB history. He debuted when it was about 2 months, less than 2 months before his 16th birthday. 15 years and 316 days old. He debuted for the Reds. He pitched just 1 or 2 games, and then he didn't play again in the majors for another 9 years. And then he went on to have a long and successful career for like 15 more years with the Reds. He was very good pitcher. He's probably, one of the kind of a Reds legend, you'd probably call him. And interesting thing about Joe Nuxhall, the Reds were actually scouting his dad. This was during World War II. And a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the Dodgers player who made his debut on his 18th birthday and pitched just 1 game, and then that was his entire career. He's the oldest living Dodger. And I can almost remember his name. Wow. I should have remembered that. But I mentioned then that a lot of these guys, when you see guys playing very young, it happened during World War II because so many big league ball players were drafted into the armed services in World War II. And so there was a need for players. Well, Joe Nuxhall, the Reds were looking at his dad. Joe Nuxhall's dad was only 19 years older than Joe Nuxhall. So he would have been like 33 or 34 when they were looking at 14-year-old Nuxhall. And his dad didn't want to give up his steady job just to play baseball. And so he stuck with his steady job, and the Reds signed his son Joe instead. And a year later, Joe was in the big leagues briefly. But the second youngest player and the youngest position player was a guy named Tommy Brown. And on this oldest.org list, I'm going to read to you what it says about him. He debuted at age 16 years and 241 days. And their little blurb about him, it says, Thomas Michael Brown's debut was excellent, with him making his first big league hit and fielding 3 chances and an error. Despite his outstanding stats, the Cincinnati Reds lost that day. The Reds achieved a record of fielding the youngest and second youngest players to date on the field in 1944, Joe Nuxhall in June and Tommy Brown in August. Their records are yet to be smashed, as both debuts occurred as a result of player shortages. Brown served in the U.S. Army for a year before returning to play in the MLB with legends like Pee Wee Reese. At the end of his career in 1953, he had played 494 games and was even featured in the 1949 World Series. Did you know Thomas Michael Brown is still alive to this day and is among the oldest living players? Couple issues with what they said. First of all, they said the MLB, which is incorrect. It's just MLB. It's not the Major League Baseball. It's just Major League Baseball. But the other funny thing about this is he didn't debut for the Reds. In fact, he never played for the Reds. He debuted for the Dodgers, and he played his first 7 seasons with the Dodgers. This whole thing, and they go big into how the Reds had the 2 youngest players in history, Joe Nuxhall and Tommy Brown. Nope. They had the youngest, Joe Nuxhall. Tommy Brown played for the Dodgers. I don't know how oldest.org got that mixed up, but it made me laugh because Tommy Brown did debut for the Dodgers. And the rest of the details of his debut are accurate on oldest.org, although they make it sound like he had a great day. He went 1 for 4. And yeah, hitting a double as a 16-year-old in your major league debut is good, but he went 1 for 4 and he made an error. And he made a lot of errors in his career. His nickname was Buckshot. Dodgers manager Leo DeRocher nicknamed him Buckshot because of his throws from shortstop to first base. They were as accurate as Buckshot. The legend says, and I don't know if this is true, I get the impression this is from his Sabre biography, and it looks like in the sources, maybe this is from an interview with him himself. But legend has it that he once threw a ball to first base from shortstop and the ball landed in the upper deck. So when you're complaining about Gavin Lux's defense later this year, just remember at least he's not throwing the ball into the upper deck. His Sabre bio also says that in 1948, Tommy became known as the 1 o'clock batting champion, a reference to his prodigious hitting and batting practice. For the year, Tommy hit 162 batting practice homers at Ebbets Field. He only hit 2 in 54 games and 156 at bats that counted, however. I don't know of any team that has ever tracked batting practice home runs. So I don't know if this is Tommy Brown counting his own batting practice home runs, or Tommy Brown talking to somebody 70 years later and remembering like pulling a number out of his hat. I don't know. I would be shocked if the 162 number is accurate. But, I think the overall point is he hit really well in batting practice and not in games, which reminds me of Wes Chamberlain, who used to play for the Phillies. I remember going to a Dodgers-Phillies game at Dodger Stadium in early 90s, 92, 93, something like that. And Wes Chamberlain in batting practice was the most impressive guy I've ever seen. Just crazy power, just destroying the ball. And then he just couldn't hit in a game. Turned out when guys were trying to get him out, he was pretty good at letting them get him out. And so it seems like Tommy Brown was kind of like that. But one of the interesting things about Tommy Brown is, unlike most of the guys who debuted super young during World War II, he actually had a decently long career. He played for 9 seasons, and then he played another 6 or 7 seasons in the minor leagues after his time in the big leagues was done. He didn't retire till he was like 31. And then he went on and had a 35-year career. What was that? The Ford glass plant for 35 years. He played in the minors in Nashville, and he met his wife in Nashville. So he stayed there and apparently still lives there. He's now 95 years old, living in retirement in Brentwood, Tennessee, which is just outside of Nashville. But yeah, Tommy Brown, I had never heard of Tommy Brown. And like I said, I grew up knowing the name Joe Nuxhall, and I was surprised that I'd never heard of Tommy Brown until for Christmas. One of the things I put on my Christmas wish list was a bunch of baseball trivia books and games and stuff, and I got several of them. And so the last few weeks, what we've done for fun around my house is we're just sitting around the house. One of my kids would grab one of the books and just start asking me questions. And I had never heard of Tommy Brown. I have a friend named Tom Brown, but he's not 95 years old and a former ball player. I had never heard of him. And I figure, this might sound arrogant, I figured if I'd never heard of him, maybe a lot of you hadn't too. And maybe this is just a blind spot. Maybe you guys all knew that Tommy Brown was the youngest position player ever and that he played for the Dodgers. But I didn't. And now I do. And now if you didn't, you do too. And that's going to do it for me for today. I love talking Dodgers with you guys. I hope you don't mind the little history lessons. I'm a big fan of baseball history, and I hope you enjoy that too. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Now that you're done here, for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Vince and I hit our 1000th episode since we became Locked On Dodgers. We hit that. I think it might have been my Puig episode earlier this week, actually, was our 1000th episode. And that's a pretty big landmark for us. We also did 138, I think, back when we were a weekly podcast called the Scully Avenue Podcast. So Vince and I have been podcasting together for a long, long time. But in a little less than 4 years, we have done over 1,000 episodes of this, and we love doing it. If you aren't listening every day, we'd love if you add 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation. If you have friends or family who love the Dodgers, please tell them about the show because maybe they'll like it too. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Samperio. I am on Twitter at Snidog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com, and our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK 5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you on Monday.